They will tell you that power is a boardroom with smoked glass walls, or a battlefield lit by flashbang cameras, or a blue-check feed that applauds your cleverness. But Machiavelli whispers a heresy deeper than any corporate mantra. Power is perception, and perception is clay moistened by fear. Imagine a crowded Florentine square at dawn, torches sputtering, gossip humming like insects, and a lean diplomat in worn velvet noting which nobles flinch when a bell tolls. He is not measuring their loyalty. He is mapping their reflexes. 5 centuries later, the square has become an algorithmic plaza, torches replaced by notifications, yet the reflexes remain. Your feed, your inbox, your anxious pulse at 3 a.m. all betray the same ancient circuitry. Machiavelli's code, outsmart or be outsmarted, is not a slogan, it is a diagnosis. In modern life, you are already inside a contest of manipulations, whether you choose to play or pretend neutrality. We begin where every manipulation begins, inside the quiet theater of your own mind, where narratives are screened in secret. The first reel is desire. Every ad, every headline, every colleague's polished anecdote seeks to hijack it. Desire is the softest metal in the psyche, easy to melt, easy to cast. Think of the Renaissance patron mesmerized by promises of immortal frescoes. Think of today's scrolling executive lured by promises of passive income. The alloy is identical. Machiavelli cautioned the prince to appear merciful while wielding terror. The 21st century marketer performs the inverse, appearing disruptive while reinforcing normality. Both understand the same formula: disguise the lever and the masses will pull it for you. Yet desire alone is brittle. It snaps without reinforcement. Enter fear, the dark twin, soldering every wish with the dread of loss. The push notification that flashes limited stock, the coworker who murmurs they're considering layoffs, the political slogan that hisses, "They will replace you," each injects scarcity, the primal rattle in the mammalian brain. Neuroscience confirms what Machiavelli intuited by candlelight: amygdala first, cortex second. Once fear floods the neural basin, logic floats like driftwood. And so the manipulator dances in that flood, planting stepping stones only they can name. Let's drill deeper, because theory without blood is useless. Picture a product launch, stage lights, breathless applause. A presenter unveils a phone, begins with a story of childhood isolation, pivots to photographs of family unity, crescendos into phrases about belonging. Only after the emotional tide rises does the slide change to technical specs. You call it marketing. Machiavelli would call it calculated mercy, granting the audience hope before taxation. Now translate that to the office. A manager praises your diligence, frames your workload as career critical, smiles as your weekend evaporates. The maneuver is the same. Coat obligation and admiration make sacrifice feel elective. Recognize the pattern and you feel the hidden strings. Remain oblivious and you dance yourself into burnout. But there is a sharper edge. Self-manipulation. The story you sell to yourself because it spares you from uncertainty. You convince yourself that answering emails at midnight is entrepreneurial spirit, that nodding through a toxic meeting is strategic patience, that silence on injustice is mature composure. The internal court jester flatters the internal prince, and so the throne rots unseen. Machiavelli warned that flatterers ruin rulers who refuse to confront truth. In the mirror of modern life, you are both ruler and victim. The external exploiters merely harvest what your inner bureaucracy has already rationalized. How then to outsmart without becoming a cynical automaton? First principle: lucidity. The capacity to see motives layered like geological strata beneath surface gestures. Lucidity is not paranoia, it is calibrated skepticism, a lens ground by evidence. You cultivate it by asking 3 relentless questions of every message that reaches your senses. Who benefits if I believe this? What emotion is being stirred in me right now? Which alternative readings have been hidden by framing? Repeat these questions until they become spinal reflexes. You will feel at first like an exile from the party, the only sober guest in a room drunk on narratives. Hold the line. The clarity that feels lonely today becomes leverage tomorrow. Second principle: asymmetry. In a world where most people broadcast their intentions, tweets, status updates, LinkedIn manifestos, the rarest asset is opacity. Machiavelli advised princes to mask their claws with velvet. In our era, the velvet is silence, the refusal to overshare. Cultivate selective disclosure. Let your public profile resemble an iceberg. Bright tip above water, massive intent below. Employers, competitors, even friends scan your digital shadow looking for leverage. Offer them decor, never architecture. This is not deceit, it is strategic privacy, the right to author your own narrative instead of having it ghost-written by data brokers. Third principle, leverage narrative reversals. When an opponent expects deference, provide measured defiance. When they prepare for resistance, offer cooperation that costs you nothing but scrambles their predictive model. The brain, Machiavelli understood, hungers for pattern. Break the pattern, and you reclaim initiative. The modern variant is algorithmic. Recommendation engines feed on past choices to project future ones. Introduce deliberate anomalies and you become statistically elusive. Your browsing history can be an act of civil disobedience. These principles sound austere, but at their core they affirm agency, the agency, to sculpt perception rather than sink into the clay of someone else's design. The choice is not between manipulation and purity. The arena is already rigged. The choice is between blind absorption and conscious authorship. The former drifts with currents, the latter learns to read tides, to steer by unseen moons. This is the heartbeat of Machiavelli's code pulsing through fiber optic veins. It tells you, the game is older than your conscience, but your awareness can still rewrite its moves. I have laid the first stones of this labyrinth, but the corridors ahead deepen into corporate stratagems that hijack loyalty, into political spectacles that choreograph outrage, into personal relationships where affection weaponizes secrets. For now, feel the weight of the key in your palm. Lucidity, asymmetry, reversal. Grip it because the doors it will unlock are as perilous as they are liberating. Corporate manipulation is rarely the cartoon villainy of smoky rooms. It is the gentle murmur of benefits packages, the candy-sweet phrase, work-life balance whispered while calendars swell with invisible overtime. Step into any open-plan office at 7 p.m., fluorescent lights humming like captive wasps, and notice how many chairs remain filled. They are not chained there by managers. They are chained by narratives implanted like subdermal chips. The story says, dedication buys security, and security buys identity, and identity is priceless. Yet the data tell a colder truth. In 2024, global turnover spiked 20% even among so-called family culture firms. The handshake that promised lifelong belonging dissolved into a template email. That is corporate mercy, Machiavelli-style reward until dependence forms, sever when margins falter. The weapon is culture, an invisible lattice of symbols and rituals. Friday socials with artisanal beer, Slack channels peppered with emojis, branded hoodies soft enough to feel like childhood blankets all serve the same neurological trick. Fuse the company's survival with your mammalian craving for tribe. Evolution wired us to equate exile with death. HR merely rebranded exile as performance improvement plans. Consider the quarterly all-hands meeting. A stage bathed in brand colors, executives recounting heroic pivots, future roadmaps glowing like promised lands. Applause surges, not because the audience believes every chart, but because synchronized clapping erases doubt for a heartbeat, and that relief is addictive. Neuroscientists call it social entrainment. Machiavelli would call it mass choreography. Then comes the loyalty test disguised as empowerment. Own your career. Translation: assume the risk we refuse to underwrite. The Renaissance prince levied taxes. The modern corporation levies optimism. You are told to curate a personal brand, stretch assignments, perpetual upskilling, all unremunerated labor that sustains the system even as it claims to liberate you. When burnout blooms, wellness webinars appear like alchemical cures, as if mindfulness could mend a structural vacuum. This is the velvet around the claw. But politics, grand theater of manipulation, brandishes a sharper spectacle. Scroll through campaign clips outside election season. Urgency beats like war drums. Each side claims apocalypse should the other prevail. Outrage is profitable, each retweet a minor act of conscription. In 2023, The most shared political posts on major platforms were 70% outrage-oriented, not policy-oriented. Our amygdalas are dialing the numbers. Algorithms merely connect the call. Remember how Machiavelli praised the utility of fear. Men love at their convenience, but fear at the prince's convenience. Replace prince with platform, and you hold the decoder ring. Watch how a scandal is minted. Step 1. Seed a phrase that frames the opposition as existential threat. Step 2. Loop curated clips until repetition supplants evidence. Step 3. Invite public commentators to debate the clip's interpretation, not its veracity. By the time fact-checkers arrive, the emotional cement has set. In neuroscience, this is emotional precedence. In philosophy, it is Plato's cave illuminated by LCD glow. If you feel the rising heat, step back. Whose hearth are you fueling? The most intimate arena, however, is relationships where affection turns covert. Every couple, every friendship, every parent-child bond runs on implicit contracts. Attention exchanged for belonging, secrets for safety. Manipulation here hides beneath love's gentle vocabulary. I'm only harsh because I care can be concern or control. The narcissistic partner mirrors your dreams until dependency forms, then withholds validation to provoke supply. It mirrors Machiavelli's counsel to alternate generosity and cruelty, keeping subjects oscillating between gratitude and dread. Look for the whiplash pattern. Sudden warmth, sudden chill. You are being tuned like a violin whose music benefits someone else. Armed with lucidity, asymmetry, and reversal, how do you counter? Craft boundaries as visible as city walls. Boundaries are not walls of stone, but walls of language, clear statements of unacceptable cost. Stick to them, and manipulators, skilled at ambiguity, lose footing. Next, cultivate optionality. Additional income streams, diversified social circles, cross-disciplinary skills. Optionality undermines leverage. It converts threats into mere inconveniences. Wall Street traders call this anti-fragility. Philosophers call it freedom from necessity. Finally, convert observation into influence. Master tone modulation. Speak softly in rooms addicted to volume. Pause strategically when rivals anticipate sprinting rhetoric. The silence forces their hand, revealing tells. Use calibrated generosity. Offer value precisely where it yields disproportionate allegiance, then withdraw before expectation cements. This is not cruelty. It is preventing obligation from mutating into entitlement. As Sun Tzu wrote centuries before Machiavelli, shape the enemy. Do not let the enemy shape you. What emerges is a paradoxical ethic. You fight manipulation with craftsmanship, not demolition. You study persuasion's gears, so you may redesign them for mutual sovereignty rather than unilateral dominance. Because the end game is not to become predator, it is to transcend the predator-prey binary entirely, to engineer ecosystems where awareness inoculates against exploitation. This is the unseen chapter of Machiavelli's code, the chapter he dared not publish in princely courts but which echoes now across fiber optics and heartbeats. Mastery is responsibility. Wield perception like a scalpel, not a dagger, or else you will one day fall on the very blade you sharpened. There is a subtler theater, still the glowing rectangle that wakes before you do, where infinite strangers rehearse intimacy inches from your eyelids. Social media did not invent manipulation. It industrialized it, wrapped it in dopamine, and delivered it on demand. Each swipe is a slot machine lever, each heart-shaped icon a pellet of social sugar. A decade of neurotransmitter telemetry confirms what Machiavelli only suspected. If you drip intermittent rewards into a hungry brain, it forgets the difference between curiosity and compulsion. That is why the feed never ends. The end would restore perspective, and perspective is fatal to control. Observe how the algorithm mothers your attention with lullaby precision praise. Provoke, soothe, repeat, until your sense of self becomes a curve on some engineer's retention dashboard. You are no longer user, you are inventory. But the deepest cut is the illusion of authenticity. Influencers explain their morning routine against a backdrop of arranged sunlight. Politicians selfie in hoodies beside carefully chosen murals. Even your college friend captions a picnic with no filter, though 6 edits glimmer beneath. The mask is not new. What is new is the exponential reach, the finely tuned optics of micromanipulation. Each post is both confession and commercial. The brain mirrors what it sees, so your private standards warp under the weight of their curated spectacles. Depression clinics report surges tied to comparison cycles. Surgeons note spikes in requests for faces that match specific filters. Machiavelli would nod, frame virtue visually, and subjects will debase themselves chasing the reflection. Now add generative AI faces that never existed. Voices stitched from syllables. Video testimonies forged with quantum fidelity. When perception itself becomes probabilistic, the manipulator's playground expands to the horizon. A deep-fake emancipation speech drops minutes before market open. Currencies convulse, billions shift, and by the time verification arrives, the profit is archived offshore. Truth is now latency-dependent. Whoever reaches the collective amygdala first owns the narrative window. Imagine Renaissance spies armed with such conjurations. Sforza would have seized Milan in a fortnight. How, then, do we keep sanity inside this kaleidoscope? We adopt attentional austerity. Like a fiscal budget ration exposure, every scroll is a taxable withdrawal from cognitive capital. Set deliberate borders. 30 minutes at dawn for inbound signals. None within 90 minutes of sleep. Use analog anchors, paper books, unlit rooms, unscheduled walks to recalibrate sensory baselines. These rituals are not nostalgia. They are neurological reset buttons purging the residue of manufactured urgency. Next, practice narrative triangulation. When a clip provokes outrage, resist the adrenal rush and source two perspectives diametrically opposed. The aim is not agreement but dimensionality, to force the cortex back into command. Keep a private log. What story did I almost believe? What data were absent? Who stands to profit? Over weeks you will feel a lattice forming in your mind, a musculature of skepticism that flexes automatically. That is Machiavellian fitness, not cynicism, but sovereignty over stimulus. There is also power in micro-disobedience. Curate your feed so unpredictably that predictive models falter. Follow a marine biologist after liking geopolitical hot takes. Search for medieval music after e-commerce marathons. You are injecting noise into the crystal ball, reclaiming opacity. Think of it as guerrilla asymmetry, small acts that reclaim statistical agency. The platforms will still harvest, but their yield becomes mulch, not leverage. Remember, too, the human counterforce. Sincerity wielded with precision. When manipulation saturates discourse, genuine presence becomes disruptive technology. Speak plain truths in meetings bloated with jargon. Write an email stripped of exclamation marks yet brimming with accountability. Look up from the panel discussion and name the ethical elephant in the room. Authenticity, once assumed, is now subversive. Use it sparingly, like flint in a tinderbox, and people will recalibrate around the spark. Machiavelli prized appearances, yes, but he also knew the rarest currency in politics was a reputation for blunt honesty, precisely because it let the speaker pivot later with doubled impact. Finally, cultivate moral intent as armor. Mastering manipulation does not require moral vacancy. Indeed, without purpose, skill curdles into predation. Etch your non-negotiables: dignity, consent, reciprocity like commandments on granite. When temptation whispers that a shortcut would be invisible, those carvings echo louder. Neuroscience aligns. Values anchored in explicit self-identity increase prefrontal override, damping impulsive scheming. Integrity is not a halo. It is a neural firewall against the corruptive feedback loop of easy wins. Feel the convergence. Attentional austerity fortifies perception. Narrative triangulation sharpens cognition. Micro-disobedience restores unpredictability. Calibrated sincerity reclaims influence, and moral intent roots it all in bedrock. This constellation is your compass through the neon jungle. The update Machiavelli might inscribe were he coding on a midnight laptop instead of parchment. Because outscripting manipulation is no longer optional, it is existential. The system has learned to read your pulse, mimic your grin, predict your silence. Only disciplined consciousness can jam that signal and broadcast something unspoiled. The crescendo approaches where these principles ignite into action, where you stand at the threshold of either orchestrating your destiny or echoing someone else's design. But before we step into that crucible, inhale. Feel how awareness itself shifts the air, how merely glimpsing the gears begins to loosen their grip. The game is ancient, the playing field is new, the outcome is unwritten. Tonight, when the city finally exhales, traffic dimmed to a distant hiss, towers blinking like watchful metronomes, step onto whatever patch of darkness you can claim and listen. Beneath the ordinary hum, you will hear an older rhythm, the pulse of appetites, the click of calculations, the inhale before persuasion speaks your name. Do not shrink from it. Instead, breathe with it, match its cadence, then slow the tempo until the storm must follow you. That is the first proof of mastery. External manipulations respond to your internal conductor. Now shut the glittering devices, not as retreat but as proclamation. Feel how vision dilates when it no longer rents itself to strangers. Let evacuated seconds fill with the raw timbre of your own interior weather questions, memories, half-forgotten ambitions sparking like embers in new oxygen. Greet them. They are the counsel that will decide which manipulations you dismantle, which you redirect, and which used sparingly you wield to defend what matters. Dawn will resume the game. Co-workers will posture, banners will bait, loved ones will barter comfort for compliance. Walk among them like a lucid dreamer strolling inside, lightning aware of every lure, author of every reaction. Spend influence where reciprocity breathes. Starve the schemes that feed on your unexamined assent. And when power must be applied, let it be the surgeon's incision, not the butcher's hack. Minimal blood, maximal consequence. If enough of us adopt this craft, lucidity, asymmetry, reversal, austerity, sincerity, intent, the landscape tilts. Systems built to harvest docility confront citizens who are no longer crops but wildfire, unpredictable, self-propagating, impossible to fence. At first, the shift sounds like distant plates grinding beneath an unsuspecting sea. Yet from that pressure, new mountains rise. On those summits, stories will be carved in the tongue of descendants not of princes and pawns, but of people who mastered the shadow so they could stand unblinded in the sun. Outsmart or be outsmarted, the code is yours now. Choose.